Hello once again and welcome to this webinar. It will include two parts. So the first part will be about RePol, Repository Policy Generator tool from NIFOS Europe project, which stands for National Initiatives for Open Science in Europe. And we have three excellent presenters with us today, Branko Marovic and Vasilij Rajovic from University of Belgrade Computer Center and Milica Sevkusic from Institute of Technical Sciences of Serbian Academy of Sciences. So we'll spend the first part talking about Repository Policy Generator tool, which is free and open source, and I tested it and it's really wonderful. And then second part will be about new developments around shareyourpaper.org, and Joe McArthur from the Open Access button will talk about that. So once again, welcome. Please use Q&A for questions or chat for questions, and over to you, Milica, now.
Thank you. I will start first to give a mild overview. So the thing that we are going to present has been developed within the NIFOS project, which is one of InfraEOSC 5B projects. This is a regional project covering Balkans and Caucasus region, and it's one of 5 similar projects that are either geographically clustered or thematically focused. So, but this thing that we have developed, the RePol tool, seems to be quite relevant to a wider community, because we already, the tool has been developed a couple of months ago or put into production, and we have already received many comments, suggestions to update, so it may be also interesting to you. It deals with repository policies, which are quite important because they inform users, both humans and machine consumers, about operation, rights, roles and responsibilities, what can be done with the content of repositories, etc. The policy also helps the provider determine and develop its own processes that need to be implemented, and how different operational aspects should be covered, because it simply sets some standards of the management of the repository. It therefore has a quite significant role in building trust in infrastructure, because there you can read what you get and what you can expect. It is also required to have a repository policy in the existing certification frameworks, and it is also, and having a policy is also required in the EOSC onboarding process. Some concerns that need to be covered through the policy is first, the owner must align with the expectations of stakeholders, end users and the wider community. And however, you cannot write whatever you want, because what you can promise depends on resources that you have, approaches that you employ, and platforms that you use, and therefore your capabilities and your strategic goals strongly influence the policy that you have to prepare. The decisions made in the policy document are all later reflected through the content that will be deposited in your repository, and how this content and information could be used, and also determines how you should implement your processes and activities that support the repository. And since repository policy and describes the content and the repository in general, what you write in the repository should also be reflected in the repository metadata that is shared and exposed by different existing and continuously expanding means. The main problems is that currently many repositories lack policies, while aggregators require some technical standards to be met, so these technical standards are relatively easy to check, while policies are subject to mostly human interpretation, and therefore they are often not seen as mandatory. It's also very difficult for repository owners, all the aspects that having a repository brings. So it's a little bit difficult to have all these covered within the repositories. On the other hand, there are some templates and guidelines that were provided by Open Door, but they haven't been updated for quite some time, and they're static, so they don't fully address the current needs of repository owners and maintainers. So what we wanted to do with the RePol, to provide a tool which allows you to create repository policies based on on a number of simple choices which are made in some forms. Also, we want policies to be updatable. So even if you create a policy and you want to come back later on because you want to change something or expectations have changed, you can basically start from where you were and get a new draft repository created for you. Also, we want to be able to split the content that you need to provide into several forms, and based on that content to create several potential documents if needed. And one of the versions of those documents are also machine-readable documents. Actually, in the humanly readable document, we already configure everything that has been provided by the end user. So this is 1/4 of machine readability, which is user-oriented and support the updating of the policy. And this way of keeping the data with the user's document allows us not to track anything about users except standard web access statistics. So there are no user accounts, there is no any kind of persistency within the tool itself. But when we mentioned other documents, what they may be, well, there are a number of things that are listed here, like terms of use, IP policy, acceptable use policy, privacy notice, and user license agreements. While some of them are related to commercial services or software products, the essence that is spread across them is by convention, in our case, mostly located within the repository policy. However, one addition, which is privacy notice, is probably the first candidate that for some extensions that could be added. We have a dedicated section in our tool, but some users may need more extensive privacy notice documents. Okay, I pass the button to Milica to continue.
Okay, I'll proceed. I hope you can hear me. So my involvement in policies as a repository manager is a hands-on involvement. I've developed my first repository policy in 2013, and I relied on the open door template. This template was quite similar. It's not, it's discontinued. Open Door now provides a list of recommendations that can be downloaded in the HTML format, but then at that time it was possible to use a form that was quite similar to ours, perhaps a bit more simple. And actually we relied on the best practice provided by Open Door because it is familiar to most users and repository managers. So this table shows what's different in the RePol template, what RePol template offers, and the Open Door recommendations. So we added a preamble, and also we added a recommendation to describe designated communities. In the process of developing RePol, we were also involved in the process of preparing a certification application for Core Trust Seal. Core Trust Seal is one of the probably the simplest, but we find it quite complicated certification schemes for repositories. And they have an application form containing 16 sections, and we were working on this in parallel to work on RePol. So we included some things that we found very useful in RePol as well. We adopted them from Core Trust Seal. So the description of designated community is one of those things. Also, another thing is privacy policy. We were not very much aware of privacy policies before GDPR. It was only after GDPR that we started including privacy policies in our repository policies. My first repository policies didn't actually have a privacy policy. The problem is that most repository managers do not have a lawyer's background, and we don't have lawyers to help us. So this is what Branko mentioned. We are not always aware of all the things that should be included in a policy. So we are learning that this is a process of learning while we are working. So this policy is modular because there will be a need to extend it as some new things emerge, like GDPR or something else. Also, we expect some new things to emerge in the onboarding process, so this can be extended. Also, curation policy is adopted from Core Trust Seal. It is also in line with the FAIR principles, and we considered it important to include it. Some elements of curation related to curation were available already in Open Door, but we separated this as a separate unit. Preservation policy has already been there. Nancy Pontica from Core suggested us to include a harvesting policy, a policy related to harvesters and aggregators as a separate section, because we are actually communicating with harvesters, and as RePol produces machine readable policies, it is suitable for aggregators to know what they can do. So we included this. This wasn't present in the first version, but we included it in the updated version, which was released days ago. So Branko, can you, next slide, please? Because the previous one. No, okay. These are the links that are important, so we'll skip this because the presentation will be shared. Next slide, please. I had an issue with the computer, so I won't do the demo. You can try it. You have the link Irina has already shared. So this is the front to the left. This is the front page. What Branko mentioned, you can download data as XML, but you can also once you, for example, create a policy, when you can save it as an XML, and when time comes that you need to update it, you can upload it here on RePol and work on the document that you already have. This is what Branko has already explained. You click on repository policy and you get to the right-hand side where you have fields to be filled in. So please, next slide. So this is the form. There are some choices that are made. And based on these choices, we've added some explanations. Some of them were not present in the first version. We will probably feel the need to update them and to make them more extensive according to your suggestions. And based on the choices you make, the final text is produced, it's generated, and it can, next slide, please. So this is the final text. And this final text has some formulations that are okay as they are, but you can also find these to-do sections. We couldn't make a system that would allow you to prepare all the text that would be suitable for all users, that could make customized, for example, preambles. But we indicated in the output text which sections you should address manually. So these are these to-do sections. They indicate which sections the policy should have, and you can customize them to your needs. So we found it very important to suggest to users what they should say, what they should explain, what their users need to know. Next slide, please. This is, I hand it over to Vasilije, who will explain more technical, the technical aspects of this, and this form, that is intended actually to IT people.
Thank you, Milica. My name is Vasilije Rajovic, and I'm a senior developer at RePol, and I was tasked with developing RePol itself. The first iteration was supposed to be a simple Java GSF form with free marker in the background, but this was meant to be custom developed and hard-coded, but it clearly wasn't the way to go, because from the start we knew these things are going to change, and they are going to change almost on a daily basis. So I had prior experience with projects like that, and that would quickly devolve into something that is unmaintainable and dead end. So I wanted to keep the options open and make it as configurable and easy to maintain as it is possible. So my idea was to create a general document generating tool. I wasn't concerned about repository policies. That was their job to take care of the semantics. My job was to build a simple tool that can generate just about any type of document with a customizable form and a free market template. And while we're at it, there was no reason why not to make a single instance of application develop more than one document. It was easy to implement multiple. Then, after developing this configurable form, Branko wanted to make it more interactive. And by interactive, it meant that some portions of the form, some input elements, or even entire panels are visible when certain conditions are met. And these conditions are determined by the things that user inputs in these elements. And after that, Branko had an idea to make form even more interactive by adding triggers that change values in certain elements in accordance with what user has entered in previous fields. And after that, we had to connect these forms into one single piece of software, because until that point, these forms were mostly independent. This allowed forms to share data, and that means if these form input elements are given the same ID, like this repo owner or parent organization, they will have the same value in all forms, even if they are not necessarily the same type, like this one line or Boolean or what have you. There is a big degree of compatibility between different types of input forms. And after that, after we had all of these data stored in session, we could create a format for importing and exporting that data which Branko talked about. And with that format, it is machine readable, but it's not something standard. This works only in the context of RePol. So if you upload a document that you have generated with RePol, it will recognize all the data you have entered, and it will use it in the next version of that policy, because we are going to keep those field IDs the same, and they will fit into the next context. So if you allow me to share the configuration and walk you through the installation process, which is quite an easy and quick thing to do. I will share my screen.
Okay, while Vasily is switching to another. Let me close my screen. While Vasily is opening up his screen, I will just mention that all these technical implementation details boil up to something very simple. You just click on the form link. You get a form where you enter some values. Depending on what you enter, you get more choices to make. And after you are done, you click on at the bottom. On the link at the bottom, and you get the document, which you can then tailor later on, upload back to the service, and get updated version of this document as if we have changed the template in the meantime. So it should be quite straightforward, but the inner workings inside include all those details Vasily mentioned, very configurable parameters, form elements, descriptions, choices. Some choices are extendable. You have basically, selection pickers where you can add additional languages, thematic areas, whatever is needed. And we tried to capture the key needs that creators of repository policies face with. But if you encounter anything that you think others may need it and is missing, you can also report it to us, and we will try our best to incorporate that into the tool, but also have in mind that we don't want to, let's say, make this too complicated, and therefore we left these to-do sections that need to be manually edited that Milica mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Do you see my screen? Is my screen properly shared?
You are moving the mouse, so I guess
okay.
It's your screen.
So here are the document forms. There is only one for generating repository policy, but there can be as many as you want. This is the place where you are supposed to update your, upload your already generated document, and it will parse all the data from it. So all the mandatory data is here. I didn't bother to make it look like something that is going to be used in real life. So if I generate the document, I'll open it here, and after entering the source code, all of the machine readable data is nothing more than as an XML embedded within the HTML as a comment. This is not meant to serve as any search engine optimization. This is for our internal use. But as long as you keep this embedded data intact, your document is going to be machine readable for any RePol instance. Now let's go to the inner workings of the application. Right now we have a configuration file. This is the main one. This is the one you're supposed to customize if you want to make anything different in the document. Our RePol instance on GitHub works out of the box. All you have to do is to clone the repository, run Maven, and deploy it on some Linux server that has servlet container server like Tomcat or 7 or 8 is going to work just fine. And you have to copy this FM templates directory to the path that is configured here. You have
Vasily, I suggest that we, stop here and leave the remaining time for questions and to Joy. But what the key point here is that you can also host the tool itself. But I assume that most of you first either try it or actually use it for your repository. But if you want to host it yourselves, that's also an option.
And what I wanted to say, it's everything works out of the box, so you have already examples that you need to modify and tailor to your needs. And that would be all I had to say about RePol. Stay tuned to our GitHub repository because I'm going to make some daily changes. There is some major refactoring going in the back, and this code is going to be even prettier and easier to maintain than it is now.
The functionality will stay, it will only grow, and you can even decide to use this platform to develop your own document generators for different policies or other types of document you may need.
That is correct.
Thanks a lot, Branko, Milica, and Vasily. I don't see any questions. Maybe I'll ask one because I used the tool to generate my repository policy, and it worked wonderful. But I was wondering whether you could tell what do I do next? So do I download that XML file and upload it to my repository, or have you done any integrations with the space repositories, for example? What's the next step when I have the policy? How do we include this machine readable policy in my repository?
That document is a simple HTML, and we chose that format because it is the easiest one to modify after downloading it in a simple text editor. And then you can then you can convert it to PDF and upload it on your server and link it from some DSpace page, or you can just put it on the server and link it directly, so it is going to be accessed from user's browser. You just gave me an idea to add, if it is going to be used as a simple HTML, I might map some of these inputs into search engine optimization fields required by Google in order to make it even more machine readable for something other than RePol server instances.
Lina, I usually edit the HTML and paste it in the repository. That the same thing that we did with the open door policy when they had a similar tool. The best way, I wouldn't recommend putting policies in PDFs because they may be skipped by browser robots. The best way is to put it as an HTML. As for the machine readability, we would like the problem why we couldn't make it fully machine readable and interoperable is because the fields are not standardized. So we would like the community, the repositories community, to make a kind of a consensus which fields, how we shall name these fields, which fields should be included, so that we can proceed to making fully interoperable policies, fully machine readable.
Thanks a lot. And there is a question about other languages. So Ravi is asking, it will be nice to generate the policy in Arabic language. Would this be possible? Have you thought of use cases of policies not in English?
We have manually, we discussed this topic while developing this. Because we have, this is a regional project and we have 15 countries, some of which have different languages. So we decided for the time being to leave it like this so that the partners can translate this from English, but it is possible to make a form that would operate in a different language.
Yeah, it would be technically trivial, but certainly laborious to translate our template to any language. So only, the phrases and sentences within it would need to be translated. But also bear in mind that this document often needs to be understandable and accessible to a wider community. So perhaps we should stick to lingua franca, in this case English.
By the way, our RePol supports having multiple documents, and each of these forms is linkable. So you can, why not, if you can translate the policy template itself and the form, you can add as many languages as you wish. Just put an effort into translating it.
Thanks. And I see one more question from Samuel. He's asking, what if an institution already has a repository policy that is already in a PDF document? How can this be converted into a machine-readable policy?
The first step would be to put what you already have in the PDF, to put it in the HTML format, and then consider using RePol to adjust this policy. But I wouldn't go that far. Just placing a structured HTML with sections, clearly defined sections, would be quite enough, because the internet browsers can read this and can find this.
Well, I might suggest downloading one of these standalone exports and then replacing its values with those from your PDF, and then uploading it, and RePol will generate a document that is machine readable and in the format. It's still laborious, but it is going to end up machine readable.
Some users, for example, from Croatia, have combined outputs of several tools and several examples with RePol. So they did it by basically producing those documents and then manually merging them. But in order to have a good RePol starting point, you should be familiar with your own policy document and decisions made in it, and then reflect those in the choices that you make in forms. You will then get the RePol draft, which you could compare against your existing policy, and then decide what to do, either to keep the formulations as they were, or adopt some that RePol suggests. So, once you already have something, it's much more difficult than when you start from scratch, but it can also help in that situation.
Thanks. And we already answered Richard's question, and we can repeat if some of you will struggle with this machine-readable conversion. You can email me or Milica, and we'll help you out. So thanks a lot, sir. Then we could move to the second part of our webinar, and Joe McArthur will talk about shareyourpaper.org, which is another exciting free and open source tool that could be very handy for repository managers. So over to you, Joe.
Perfect. Hopefully folks can hear me okay and see me all right. Thank you so much to EIFL for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to come and speak to this fantastic coalition. And I would just get right into it because I know we're a little short on time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about shareyourpaper.org and also the tools that we've built for libraries to help them get more deposits for their repository with less work for repository managers, for library staff, and of course the depositors themselves. I am Joe McArthur. I direct the Open Access Button, which is a nonprofit that builds a series of tools. This is the one that we're focused on at the moment, and a little bit more about us at the end. But for now, I'll just start by getting right into the meat of things. What does shareyourpaper.org and the deposit workflow that we've built look like? You're seeing it now. what we've tried to build is a very simplified deposit workflow where depositors, be they authors, students, library staff doing things on behalf of authors, can come to our website or indeed your website with our tools for libraries, put in a DOI or some identifier of their paper, get told exactly how to archive that copy, what copy they need to provide and how to find it, drag and drop that onto the web page and hit submit, and the deposit will be done. It will turn up in Google Scholar, Web of Science, and that is it. And behind the scenes, there is no work for the library. This is all happening basically in real time, and all the required checks that you guys would hope are being done would be, in fact, being done. So this is sort of the very fast overview of what Share Your Paper is and what it does, but I'm going to walk through it a lot slower now to explain all the different moving pieces and how they can work for you. But this is sort of what we're up to. So we built Share Your Paper, I've already said, to sort of make deposit much simpler for depositors and libraries. And our goal was really to sort of have a high deposit rate, sort of create a system that got you lots of deposits, lots of people making their work open, while making it basically sort of costless to do that, both for the library and for the depositor, and make sure those deposits were high quality. And of course, lots of folks have tried to do these there's been a lot of different ways people have managed the deposit process over the past 10 or 20 years. There has been self-deposit where depositors come and sort of figure things out for themselves. They figure out what the repository is, why it should work for them. They go to Sherpa Romeo and figure out what the various policies affecting their work are, and then they might try and sort of do the upload, fill in all the forms and things like that. And that is, of course, relatively inexpensive for the library to facilitate because there aren't a lot of checks, but often, it's a lot of work, so you don't get a high deposit rate because it's difficult for folks. This is a complicated thing to do well. And you get a sort of varying quality of deposits. It's all generated by the author themselves or the depositor, and they don't often know exactly what they're doing. And so you can have some metadata problems. So to fix that, folks have said, okay, we as librarians and as the library will take a bigger role in this. We will help authors out in this process and do a lot of the work for them, right? So in that case, your deposit rate is often higher. And your quality is higher because librarians are very good at doing this work. The downside is that, it then costs a lot of time and money in terms of staff time and training and everything like that to actually do the work here. And so that is not something that is often achievable for lots of institutions or to just be done for every author in the world. Or, every paper, it would be very sort of difficult to do that on behalf of the authors themselves. And so we wanted to sort of get the best of both worlds in these systems. And that's what we've tried to do with the Share Your Paper deposit. Have something that is very easy for authors and for the library, so that you get a high deposit rate, but with no cost, and you still get those high quality deposits. And this is sort of what we're trying to aim for with this system. So, this is just laying that out again. So, our goal here was a system with high deposit rates, high quality deposits, and where that's really inexpensive, right? And what that means in terms of the open access movement and the repository community in general is that what we'd love to contribute to as an organization is a strong alternative to APCs, an asset for bibliodiversity, making sure that lots of people, regardless of whether or not they can pay to make their work open access, can get their work out there and gain the benefits of open access, right? And then, the very simple way to say that is what we care about is making more things open access in the world while having that cost less. So that's what we've tried to do. We built this in partnership with the library community. One of the most important folks in this project was Layla Sternum, who was our sort of co-designer. She works as a scholarly communications librarian, a repository manager, essentially, at the University of Montana State, and was really one of the sort of core architects behind this. And so I will walk through how Share Your Paper works for her and for repository managers in general, by sort of taking a look at her workflow and how things are working for her. So there's 4 key points I want you to sort of pay attention to as we walk through here, and 4 key things of happening behind the scenes that really make this possible, that make that very streamlined workflow where all authors need to do is drag and drop their work possible. The first is that we collect lots of metadata behind the scenes on articles, right? A lot of the deposit process is filling in forms saying what you're depositing, where it's been published, when it was published, and sort of we wanted to take that out and essentially we do a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that for every article out there, every academic journal article, we know all the core details about it, all the metadata that is available, we have it. Everything from article titles to abstracts to citations, everything like that. So first off, we've collected all of that together and we can bring it to bear in this process. The second thing is we've built an automated permission system. So, many of you will be familiar with tools like Sherpa Romeo, where authors can go look up their journal policies and things like that. And then they've got to sort of, talking about policies, they've got to sort of figure out what those mean, how they apply to their article, how maybe their funder policies or institutional open access policies affect things. And so that's pretty difficult. And of course, it's a bit scary because it sounds like law and copyright and what if you get sued and things like that. We built a system that that does all of that for you essentially, and so you can just tell us what article you want to deposit and we'll tell you, we'll sort of figure out using all those policies how you can legally do that. And then when hopefully you upload something, we'll take those we'll check that what you actually upload meets all those standards. So for instance, we'll basically check that the article, the version that you give us is in fact the right version. So it's not a publisher PDF and it's not an author accepted manuscript. We do that check as well. And then we wrap all of those things in careful design and things that we've worked really hard to user test with authors so that this process can be simple for them and for you to manage. So to walk through that in depth again, if you're, often if you're running a repository, you'll be doing outreach to people. So this is in one way how we imagine the process starts and how it starts here. So, if you're reaching out to folks in your campus about their new fantastic article that they've just published, one of the first steps is that you can simply, send a link to that person that looks just like this, that will they can click on and go directly to a page on your website that allows you to that allows the author to deposit it. If the author is just coming to your repository website without any prompting, then they can just put the DOI in themselves. But we're trying to remove as many steps as possible to the process. So one thing you can do is just send a direct link to every author telling them how to archive their work. When you get here, behind the scenes, we will have already figured out what the metadata of this article is, where it was published, when it was published. We'll have behind the scenes, we will have figured out those, how it can be legally shared. And we're providing here a bunch of information, sort of the authors need to know about that and sort of reassuring them. So, what you'll see here is that we're talking about the journal policy. We are helping them understand what version of that article they need to go and get, right? So, telling them to, sort of not use the publisher PDF, the version on the journal website, often they'll need to go and sort of get the accepted version and things like that. And we walk them through that process. And of course, we're letting them also know before they deposit that they can do a few things here and there that often make authors feel more comfortable about depositing their work. This is, for many people, still a bit of an unusual process to go through. So we do a bit of hand-holding to make sure that folks feel comfortable and know what they can and can't do at this stage in order to get their work into your repository. And then the only step left is to drag and drop the file, upload the work, and then behind the scenes, again, what we'll do is we'll look at the work that they actually submitted, and again we run a few checks. We check that the version of the paper is not a published PDF, i.e. it sort of aligns with all the various policies, and we double check that the paper is the paper that is described. So, you know, if you're talking about you know, so it's the right paper for the it's the right article for the right submission, and a few checks like that. And then what we do is we as shown here, we provide an instant link that folks can go and share their work on. So that's one of the big benefits of doing all of these automated checks up front, is that the work is immediately shared with and they don't need to wait on you know, any approval process or anything like that, because we've already done that. And of course, if at this stage they get things wrong, then we can let them know straight away as well. So if they do submit a publisher PDF or something like that, then we can let folks know straight away. Let folks know straight away that they've made a mistake, and they can fix it on the fly, which in our user testing, people really appreciated, knowing that, you know, we really did have their back and we were letting them know in a timely way what they needed to do. So this workflow integrates with any repository. It can go on your website as an adjunct to, or sort of, you know, alongside your existing forms. It's customizable, so you can put in your different repository policies as that happens. You know, get things into, you know, include your repository name, things like that. And the setup can take just about 30 minutes from a non-technical member of the team. We've just sort of got a click-through system where you sort of go to our website and you can adjust the various settings that you want in, you know, sort of similar way as our last speakers. And at the end of it, we'll give you a snippet of code that you can copy onto your website, and then it will just work. You don't need to host this. You don't need to, you know, update it all the time. We'll handle all of that for you. And of course, we'll ship you new features whenever they're ready as well. And then you will start to be able to accept deposits in this really easy, straightforward way for you and for authors. To sort of speak quickly to what's coming next, and some things that I know will be top of mind. You know, at the moment, this tool, you need to start with a DOI. I know that for many folks in the EIFL community, that will be a bit of a barrier, because a lot of articles will not have DOIs at first. That's okay. We're working on sort of not requiring a DOI in order to do the deposit. We'd really love if that is a barrier, folks, if you let us know, because that just helps us make sure that when we're building this, that we're doing it correctly. For you also, please do get in touch with us there. And also with that sort of automated permissions checking system, we're also building an interface where you'll be able to go and sort of just check how to share the work and not actually do the deposit. So you'll be able to use that open source system that works on not just journal policies, but for all the policies that affect a piece of work, and digest that for the individual article that your patrons may be looking to share, and that you may be, you know, also needing as part of your workflow. So you can find out about much more about all of this work at shareyourpaper.org/libraries, where the tool that you can set up for your library, you can go and use that today. And of course, shareyourpaper.org, people can just deposit there as well. But you know, what we'd really love is for you to set this up for your repository as well. And of course, I have told you just a small fraction that I can about the tool. I really want to keep us to time today and be respectful of that. So I've sort of shortened this down. There's a lot more information and a lot more that we can share. And you can get information as it becomes available on our email list, and we'll send you things every month or so. Just to reiterate what Irina said, all of these tools are free, they're open source, and they're built by a community-owned nonprofit. So you can trust that we are on your side and really want to be sort of strong partners for the repository community moving forwards. Thank you so much to the folks who funded this work, especially the Arcadia Foundation and the libraries who are paying to support these tools and helping build them as well. And I think I can answer many questions.
Thanks a lot, Joe. There are a couple of questions already, and some of them came when you started talking. So maybe you already clarified them, but it would be good to iterate it once again. So there was a question from Richard there. Please, who owns the document if you deposit your paper to share.paper.org, and where is the server based? So maybe we should clarify that it's permission check-in tool and deposit happens in your repository if you decide so, or if it's not connected with the repository, then it goes to Zenodo, right? So yes. There is no change of ownership.
Exactly. So by default, the work gets deposited into Zenodo, but as a part of the setup process for libraries, we have half a dozen different tools that you can use to import content from Zenodo into your repository. And also we are able to set up direct integration with your repository as well. That's really the one part of the system that isn't free, because it takes time and money on our end to do that integration, maintain it for you over time, and things like that. Of course, it's open source, so you can do these things yourself, but that's one thing that for us is a bit tricky to handle for everyone. So that's one of the ways that we I think that answers the question.
Thanks. Then a question from Nancy: how does the tool treat a full text with an embargo?
We embargo it. So the permission system contains information on everything from what version is allowed, what the exact embargo date is for that particular article, what the exact deposit statement is for the article, who owns the copyright, what the license of the work that can be deposited is, what sort of everything. It has publisher policies, but also has institutional and funder policies. Funder policies are coming soon, sorry. Institutional policies, and it understands the interactions between all of those as well. And it's important to note, not based on Sherpa Romeo. We had to build a system from the ground up to enable this level of automation. And in doing that, we have reviewed hundreds of publisher policies and put them into machine-readable databases that are completely open source with open data, and have all of not just the journal policies, but all the policies that can affect the work. And this works at not a journal resolution, but an article level. So this is a sort of very different way of doing permissions checking. And what it allows is for us to do this sort of very streamlined but high quality deposit workflow. So that's one of the big systems behind here that we have built in order to be able to do this.
Thanks. And there are, I guess, 3 related questions. So the first one: can share your paper work with any repository software?
Yes.
Then another question is: does it mean that you can take share your paper instance and add it to DSpace or any other software that is open source? And then a question from Richard: could you train IT guys in Ghana, in Ghanaian repositories, to integrate it with their repositories?
Yes. Conscious of time, so I'm giving very short answers. My yeses are extremely sort of enthusiastic yeses. They're just simple answers. Yeah, you can do all of those things. And I'm sure my contact information will be passed around afterwards, or you can, there's contact information on the website, instructions for all of these things. But yeah, the answer to all of these questions is yes.
So maybe as a next step, we could say that those of you who would like to integrate and would need some guidance, please let me or Joe know, and then we'll schedule a separate session on, like, for those guys who will be doing integration. To discuss technical details. And I guess now we're talking about DSpace software mainly.
That sounds fantastic. We'd love to do that, and more generally sit down with anyone who's interested in using this without a DUI, and also using it to just look up sort of all the different people who are interested in sort of getting just the policy information, not doing the whole deposit process with this tool. So these tools are being actively developed, and we're really interested in working with the EIFL community to make sure it works well. If you already have an IR, you do not need to move IR or port your content or anything like that. Richard, I'm just seeing your question.
Yeah, that's for new content, Richard, if you want to check permissions for the articles that you would like to deposit.
And we will link the paper to the appropriate authors and things like that. It does a lot of things that folks want.
So I guess you already answered Ravi's question. You link papers to particular author with specific ID identifier, ORCID.
Exactly. And sorry, I've just seen Richard in the chat. If you have papers in the IR, would you need to put them into shareyourpaper.org? No. This puts papers into your repository. This is not a new repository. It's a streamlined deposit system. So you don't need to backfill, sort of share your paper with your existing content. We'll put more content wherever your content is. And there's APIs for all of these systems, so you can use all of the individual systems here have APIs that you can use.
Then Michael is asking, is the outcome of the copyright checks legally binding? What if share your paper gives a wrong result?
If share your paper gives the wrong result, we have a takedown process where publishers could escalate that with us. It hasn't happened yet, and we'll be public about it when it does. So it's any almost no checks that are done here are sort of in some sense legally binding, but we have a good installation of a takedown process, and we are in communication with many publishers in order to make sure that the answers here are correct. And all the data is sort of editable by publishers as well. So we have good insulation against that, to the extent that we've worked with some publishers to improve their policies based on questions that we have and sort of areas where they're being unclear. So we have generally pretty good relationships there that we feel good about. If we make a mistake, then there's lots of ways to mitigate that.
Lena is asking, can an institution mine data, get content hosted by research affiliated to the institution from shareyourpaper.org repository to their repository using sort protocol? So maybe we'll stress again that shareyourpaper.org is not a repository. You're not really storing. It's a database of publishers' policies. So maybe if we could rephrase the question.
So, right. So, the content that we get, we put it into Zenodo at the moment, or we can put it into your repository. In either of those places, you can obviously mine the content as you would wish. Our job is not to host your content long term, to preserve it, to make it searchable and discoverable, to it's not a replacement for your repository. It's a way to get more content into your repository, and it's a deposit workflow for doing that. And we've built out all the tooling that you need to make that very smooth. but our goal is to get stuff into your repository, not for you to use us as a repository. If you have no repository, you can use Zenodo as a repository for your content, and that's something that we'd be thrilled if you did. But you don't need to use us as a repository. We work with your existing repository and just get more content in it with less work for you. That's our emphasis. And there is, of course, there's lots of documentation for how to set up that integration with your repository. It leans on standard ingest processes and very simple sort of copy and paste code in order to do that. It's straightforward enough that a non-technical person can do this using in half an hour. It's very straightforward. Just go to shareyourpaper.org/setup, and we will walk you through a step-by-step process of generating the system for your particular repository and your particular needs.
Thanks. Ravi is asking, is there any documentation on how to do the integration Share Your Paper into our repository?
Yes, that's the question I just answered. The second one is, yeah, we have documentation on the website talking about levels of coverage, levels of things like that. If you have specific questions, we're more than happy to answer those, whether not sort of on websites or on our blog. So yeah, happy to sort of get any of that for folks where desired.
Then one more. If we choose to cross-check our papers against your database, is your service going to have an API for automated access?
Yes, we have APIs right now for cross-checking and doing whatever you want with these things. Yes, it could happen that what's in Sheparomeo is different than ours. Again, we've learned a lot of lessons from the Sheparomeo team. So one of the things that we do is, we have rebuilt, we have gone from the ground up with all of these policies. So we have, reread the core text of all the publisher policies. We've had them reviewed by multiple people. And one thing we do is we monitor all of those policies every hour. And the moment they change, we find out about it and we make the change to our policy database within 24 hours. That means that our policies are always up to date. And if you submit a policy, we will just maintain that over time, sort of, to within an hour's resolution. And of course, people can submit suggestions to our database as well, and we will review those and make changes as required within 24 hours. Those are our two sort of promises to the community. And also importantly, in our database, we archive every single publisher policy that's given, and we serve archived links. So you can make what's certain with our database is you'll have all the information you need. It's always up to date and it's robust and reliable over time. And those are things that we have sort of embedded from day one into that automated permission service, because we are sort of working really hard to have no one need to worry about this ever again. That's what the service is working on. Yes, it can be accessed publicly. Yeah, all the data is open. The code for it is open source. We're building a user interface where you can sort of look at individual policies more easily over the course of the next couple of months. But you can already check policies in bulk and via our API, and of course via Share Your Paper.
And do you happen to remember whether you have any policies in Arabic language, any Arabic journals?
There's too many journals in the database for me to be able to answer questions, unfortunately, that specific. If we were to see a policy in Arabic, we would work with an Arabic speaker to get that translated and then monitor it for changes. Our team speaks a few languages, but unfortunately, Arabic isn't one of them. But if folks came to us with Arabic policies that they wanted included in the database, we'd be more than happy to work with them to get them included and translated into machine readable formats and things like that. Just, I would say just email me again with some examples of things you'd like us to cover. And again, we will get back to you within 24 hours and see if we can include it. And the answer so far has never been no. So take from that what you will.
Thanks. And there is one more question. How much does a service for already existing institutional repository cost? Maybe you could clarify that as well. Yeah, so it's free.
Yeah, it's every, like 99.999% of what I've spoken about so far today is the answer is it's free. If you want us to directly integrate with your repository where things will not go into Zenodo, but they will go into your repository, that costs some money at the moment, and it depends on what you're able to afford. So pricing is flexible, and it's just sort of, if you want to do that particular piece, then just I hope folks can understand, because that takes some time from our team. We generally try to recoup that, but if that wasn't possible, I would still encourage folks to come and talk to us, because over time, we realize where folks are not able to pay, we would still like to be able to do these sorts of things. So it's something where I would say just sort of be in conversation with us. And we want this to work really well for people, because our end goal is that things get into your repository and that's really easy for you. And we will try and figure out a way to make that work for you. It's just a case of finding out some way for us to manage the costs of doing that at a really high level of quality for everyone.
But I think if you have in your repositories people who will be able to do these integrations, and Joe is happy to show how to do it. So maybe that's the next step for us to think about. If you want to have this integration, think who would be people from your teams who would like to be part of those discussions, and then we'll discuss the details. Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions. So then I'll be hearing from you, or you could also email Joe if you need another session demo with UAT staff on doing the actual integration. And thanks a lot for joining. And thanks again, Joe and Milica, Branko, Vasily. That was very interesting, and a lot of exciting developments. Thank you so much. Apologies that we went over time. Wishing you a good rest of the day, and let's stay in touch. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks so much, everyone, for the great questions, discussion, and thank you to the EIFL team for inviting us.